morning. Welcome to another edition of Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast in which you interview people about their spiritual lives and how they support others in lifting their spirits. I'm Reverend Joel Grossman, interfaith minister, director of spiritual services for Constellation Hospice here in Newburyport, and I offer spiritual coaching on a donation basis virtually.
And I'm Ted Jones, a meditation teacher at the North Shore Insight Meditation Community.
Our show is based on the four following principles. One, everyone is spiritual. Sometimes we are conscious and active in our spiritual lives, sometimes not, but we always have a spirit.
And second, that there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through formal religious or spiritual pursuits, but also through nature, art, human relationships, service to others, just to name a few.
Third, everyone's spiritual path is unique and may change in small or large ways over time.
And fourth, that it's important to respect your own spiritual journey, trusting that one step will naturally follow the next, and respect the unique spiritual journeys of other people, even though they may be very different from your own. We're not here to convince you of any particular method or practice, but more just to offer food for thought.
Very pleased to have Marc Clopton with us today as our guest. Marc is probably best known in the area as the founder and director of the Newburyport Actors Studio for many years at the Tannery in Newburyport and now in Salisbury. But Marc is also a shaman and has much to share about that tradition and the way he practices it locally and helps people through that practice. So thanks for being here with us today, Marc.
It's wonderful to be here. It's sort of full circle because my introduction to the spiritual community here in Newburyport was your meditation circle that you did down on Route 1 at the medical center way back when.
Yeah.
Right.
Holistic family practice.
Holistic family practice. Couldn't think of the name. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very nice to be here with you guys.
Good.
Yeah.
So, Marc, if you would start with sharing with us about your spiritual journey through life, where it started, and
all right. Okay. Well, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and we had a minister, Dr. Clopton, who I just adored and thought I respected him so much, and I believed in, the stories that were told about Jesus and his healing capacities and his compassion. It always spoke to me as a kid. And I even at one point, as a teenager, thought I might become a minister. But I got disillusioned with the church and organized religion and moved away from that. And many years later, I began to understand some of my internal response to the Jesus story as I learned more about healing and metaphysics and my own intuitive gifts. So it actually started way back then, but with no conscious awareness beyond the idea that I might want to be a minister. Then I got into theater in college, and one day sitting in the great big 13-seat main stage theater at the University of Maryland, waiting for rehearsal to start, I was looking down at the stage, and there were just a few work lights on, no theatrical lighting. And I only know this now. I would not have said this then, but I was seeing people's auras. I was seeing a glow around them. And I was feeling a sense of absolute peace and contentment, and said to myself, oh, this is my church. And which really came out of the blue, because I was not following any spiritual traditions in my college years. But that realization came to me then. So I pursued acting and directing and design in college, and went on to do theater on a small scale after I left college, and eventually found my way into a wonderful acting class in Los Angeles. And one night, watching what was going on stage, I began to see patterns and see like someone in their crone condition. And this was all very spontaneous, all very disorienting. And then it evolved into, I would be watching someone up on the stage and I could feel in my body where their tension was held and make an adjustment. And one of my friends, one night particularly, I could feel the energy blocked in her throat. And I didn't think about it. I just did something like clearing my throat. And she turned from the stage in the middle of her scene and looked straight at me. And then when she was done, she came down and sat next to me. And she goes, "What did you do?" I go, "I don't know what I did." And so that was the beginning of a new level of inquiry for me. And we had a good friend who was an Ayurvedic healer, and she was teaching and healing people. And I went to her for some of my own healing needs and worked with her. And then when she offered courses, I studied with her. And that's where I began to learn about acupressure and meditation and joint meditation and consciousness. And she was the first person to use the term shaman in regards to me. Not a word, again, that I was at all familiar with. And I go, "Oh, no." She said this. She said, "If you choose to claim this, you're a shaman." And I went, no, I'm a writer, I'm an actor. I don't know what a shaman is, you know. But what I did know was that when these episodes happened, I felt so at peace and so open and so unconflicted. And so I paid attention to that, because I would say now, looking back on it, that was me moving into an unconditional state. And so that kept me going in terms of my interest and my pursuit of that, while I was also pursuing acting and writing. And a lot of my friends who were in our acting group were also going to Shelley for healing, and Shelley eventually started to say, you know, there's a lot of people who are wanting attention. You know, if you happen to be with them, you know, give them your attention. And so I would do that, and I would find that by just touching someone, I could help them open up and release whatever they were holding. No mentality, really, other than instinct. It was all intuitive. And that's when I began to put things together about my early childhood experiences in church. Because whenever the minister talked about Jesus laying on of hands and healing people, I would feel the energy in my hands. And I took it absolutely literally, that when he said, if you want to be like me, do like me, that we all possess those capacities to heal and to be compassionate in a meaningful and effective way. And so it was in my 30s that I began to put things together for myself and go, oh, this has been going on with me for a while. I just didn't know what it was. And then I continued to pursue different healers, learned about crystal healing by going to a crystal healer as her client and then studying with her, and other teachers at the Healing Light Center in Pasadena, and had the incredible good fortune to meet Jose Lugo, a healer from Mexico, who was a trained neurosurgeon, who, while doing brain surgery, felt like it was way too invasive and there had to be a better way to heal people than with a scalpel. And he went back to his Mexican roots and studied with the curanderas and curanderos and became a shaman. And he worked on me. I had had a terrible car accident and had bad injuries. And a year later, I developed a condition as a result of the injuries that was very painful. And that's how I met him. My friend said, oh, there's a healer in town. Why don't you go see him? And he healed me through prayer. And he was a delightful man. So whenever he lived in Mexico, but he'd come to LA a lot. And whenever he was in town, I'd go listen to him talk, or go to him for healing, which I didn't really need much after that.
One session?
One session.
Really? Wow.
One session. Yes, quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. That really got my attention. And I begged him to teach. He said, no, I don't teach. Then, as fate would have it, so I worked with a number of healers. Some, their modality spoke to me, others didn't. The ones that did, I studied with them and to learn more about consciousness and how consciousness works in the body, and how the brain is associated with that. And then, after I moved here, one of my good friends in my spiritual group out there called me and said, there's a guy you gotta meet. He's just amazing. His name is Don Miguel Ruiz. And so I put together a workshop for Miguel to do here and met him. And he turns out to be another Mexican neurosurgeon.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
Explain this to me, right?
Yeah.
Who had a terrible car accident right after he finished his training and was was officially a neurosurgeon, had a terrible car accident, and as a result of that, made the choice to go study with the curanderos. His mother was a very well-known curandera in Mexico. And he studied with her and studied with other people, and he became a shaman, and he ultimately became very well known because he wrote the Four Agreements, and his books became very popular, and just a marvelous man. And so I ended up organizing 2 different workshops for him here on the East Coast, and got to know him. And also, I'm jumping around a little bit. While living in California, I met Malidoma Somé, who was a marvelous teacher, shaman from Burkina Faso. Met him through a friend of mine who was a child advocacy lawyer, and she had helped him. He was in this country teaching at the University of Michigan. Somehow they met, I forget how, and she helped him revise his screenplay about his life, because he was kidnapped by the Jesuits and held prisoner while being trained to become a priest, while being sexually abused by the priests.
Oh, yes.
And at 19, he escaped from the seminary and made his way back through the jungles with the help of the animals, because he didn't know where he was, and he had been kidnapped at 4, and now he was 19, trying to get back to his village. Got back successfully, and was initiated into his culture, because he was destined to be their shaman. And so there was a big ritual about getting him back into the culture. And he did a small workshop in LA that just 5 of us went to one afternoon. And it was extraordinary. And so he got my attention. And then, as fate would have it, he came here to Newburyport. He and his wife, Sabanfu, came here, and I offered to put them up. They were looking for somebody to house them, so it was a nice reconnection.
Were they coming for some?
They came to do a workshop out in, they did it in Maudsley, actually.
Wow.
And a whole weekend workshop. And so that was wonderful to reconnect with them. So I just have had the good fortune of being exposed to so many different traditions, and then met Denise Kinch and at Bob Vadeco's office, and she was talking about going to Peru and working with the shamans down there, and she said, I have room in my next group, do you want to come? And on a very crazy spur of the moment, I said yes, and went down there with her, and she worked with the medicine people, you know, in the Sacred Valley, and got to work with those men and women who were remarkable. And so all of it just served to deepen my understanding of the spiritual journey that we make as human beings, that we're living within the paradox of being physical and spiritual simultaneously. And seeing the joy and the humor in these wonderful teachers and healers from all these different traditions and cultures, it just expanded me in a marvelous way and reinforced what I was already experiencing within myself about my own intuitive gifts. You know, that I studied with my friend who was a channel, and I learned how to channel, and had a ritual where I took responsibility for my gifts and accepted my shamanism with 2 of my significant teachers out in Joshua Tree National Forest, which is an amazing place where all sorts of fabulous, wonderful things happen. And so my struggle about am I a writer, teacher, actor, or am I a shaman resolved itself one glorious day when I realized it's all the same work. And I didn't need to think of it as bifurcated. That in some cases I work with people privately, they lay on the massage table, they're able to relax and meditate in a certain way. And in the theater they're standing up and they're moving around, but it's really all the same work about honoring what's going on with you and having the safe space in which to express it.
Ever since you spoke about the woman who was blocked in the throat on stage, and that you coughed, and that I had this sense of, well, that's kind of a natural for you to, you know, continue in the theater, that they aren't different. You know?
They are not different. They are not. It is not different. And so the day that coin dropped for me was a big day. I was like, I can stop worrying about should I be putting my attention more here or here. It's all the same work, and hallelujah. And I found a new level of peace with that, and continue on doing the work. And the classes, the acting classes, are pure joy. I have such fun there, and people find their voice. They find their strength and expression. And in the private work, people touch their spirit. You know, the shamanistic premise basically is that we are body, mind, and spirit. You cannot heal one level without including the other two. It never happens just on one level. And so one of the big additions, I think, in doing shamanistic work is that it really puts spirit in a balanced position with body and mind.
Yes.
Because what I found with a lot of people, when I ask them about their spiritual process in life, a lot of people have shied away from it, not knowing what to expect. And indeed, in a lot of cases, fearing that if they look too deep inside, they'd find some terrible flaw. It's an amazingly consistent fear that people have.
Yeah.
You know, and I have one friend who was a client at the time, and during one of her journeys on the table, she was saying, "Oh, I see a light. Okay, and what happens next? Well, it's getting closer. I'm getting closer to it. I think it's getting closer to me. I'm getting closer to it. Okay, tell me what happens next. Well, it's getting closer." And then she goes, "Oh." I said, "What?" She goes, "It's me." And that kind of sums it up,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I go, okay, we're done here, you know? And so there are many opportunities in my private work where we can approach a wounding, a trauma, and understand how beliefs began to get warped and or more deeply solidified that became a prison for that person. And that if they can begin to see how the belief systems got derailed or went in the wrong direction, that they're empowered to release that and change in the present time and heal from some really significant wounding.
And that has to include the body
Absolutely.
as well. I mean,
Yes, because so many of those traumas are stored in the big muscles and
yes, and
in the organs.
you know,
Right.
Bessel van der Kolk wrote "The Body Keeps a Score" about 6 or 7
Right.
years ago, and
Right.
it's still on the bestseller list.
Yeah,
and
for good reason.
For good, very good reason.
Yeah, yeah. And so, to me, I just feel so fortunate to have experienced the teachers I've experienced, the experiences I've experienced, even the woundings I've experienced that I've learned from as I've healed from them and discovered the wisdom that comes with the experience and can with confidence encourage people to look deeper, and not say this is the end of the story. It's just a step in the story, and there's more to discover. There's more to experience. Yeah.
Now, we've been talking on the individual level, but I want to say, if people don't know about this, that if people feel that there's a strong spirit in Newburyport, it's because Marc Clopton has touched so many people in the community in the way that you're sharing with us, that there's a collective spiritual upliftment.
Absolutely, and that is such an important thing to identify and revere, because we do accomplish more as a collective than we do as individuals. I feel that every time I have a fire ceremony or we come together in a group, that I expand in a way that I don't when I'm by myself, even though I can channel by myself and I can contemplate by myself. Other people are my connection to spirit. And we go places together that we can't go alone. And that's so important to remember, because our Western heroic society makes us think we're supposed to do it all on our own. We're supposed to take ownership of our accomplishments, and we're supposed to know this before we've learned it. You should know that, and go out there and be a hero. What the hell is that, right? And so then, the equal and opposite reaction is the judgment we end up with towards ourselves that, oh, I'm not doing it right, or I'm not good enough, or I don't matter, which is such a tragic belief, to fall into, because everybody matters.
Absolutely. And going back to the individual, another reason why I think people shy away from their spiritual life and work on it is for fear of failure. That I'm going to commit myself to meditating 20 minutes every day, and then I don't do it. I'm a failure.
Oh, absolutely. I went through
Not
that.
at all.
Right. Whenever I tried to, I left this out of my story. I did transcendental meditation in my early 20s, which really opened my eyes also. But when I was at the center meditating with people, I was fine. When I'd go home and try and meditate by myself, I'd always fall asleep. And I go, damn it, why can't I do this, And I finally got it. Okay, you're processing things in what you're calling sleep that you just aren't ready to process in your conscious waking state, and it's all okay. But I went through that frustration, absolutely. Yeah. So we reinforce each other by you saying that. Somebody else can go, oh, I'm not alone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people have the misconception to meditate means you clear your mind.
Right.
We never clear our mind.
No, right.
But Ted and I do a lot of teaching around meditation.
Right.
That
And you just you entertain everything. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Now, did I understand that when you were out in LA that you were doing some acting coaching?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
were you bringing what you're sharing with us today into the coaching work as well?
Oh, yes.
I would imagine
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Yes. With some subterfuge, I will admit, because people who are coming to acting class aren't necessarily coming for spiritual awakening, although many would say that they had that conscious experience eventually. So I would use my intuition and ask questions and draw people out. But yes, I was definitely using my intuitive skills as a teacher and continue to rely on that as a teacher.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a question. You made a sort of fleeting reference in Peru to the medicine people. That shamanism generally, I think, in the popular culture is associated with medicinal plants,
Right.
particularly ayahuasca.
Yes.
I don't know how much you want to get into your own
Sure.
experience
Yeah.
with that, but you had some pretty intense spiritual awakenings from an early age, and then you moved into becoming.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of people who don't have that, and who are searching for it, and that I think there's a perception in the sort of spiritual community that ayahuasca and other substances can provide at least a glimpse into that.
Without a doubt. I'm so glad you asked, because I kind of skipped over that whole part of my experience. I did work with ayahuasca before I even went to Peru, under very controlled circumstances in a committed group that had worked together for months. We developed a lot of trust and faith, and our teacher was a wonderful guy who was really very painstaking about making it a positive and safe experience for everyone. And that was a major turning point. I can't believe I left that out of my story. In my shamanistic identity, because my dominant guide came through during an ayahuasca journey, whom I call the grandfather, a North American, indigenous North American, who was wearing a buffalo hide and buffalo headgear. That's the best I can call it, and I call him the grandfather.
And this is a vision.
This is a vision and a sensual experience.
Yes.
A sensory experience of him coming to me and being with me ever since. And so when I channel, usually it's the grandfather I channel, although I do channel other presences at different times. But yeah, and that was ayahuasca and me get along really well. Okay, it isn't for everybody, and I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It's a powerful medicine, and it needs to be done under really proper circumstances. I did eventually do it in Peru with the Peruvian shamans, and had a wonderful and continued intense experience. And yes, nature is speaking to us all the time if we will listen. That the wisdom of nature is present, and we get that information through intuitive channels, intuitive pathways within us. Michelle Small-Wright, I don't know whether you know her, she runs Paralandra, which is a farm in Virginia where she raises plants and makes tinctures out of them for healing. And she had a very interesting experience as a child speaking to nature spirits. That was her gift. And so she got instruction from nature about how to communicate with plants and how to create an environment where they could grow well, and how to communicate with the insects so that they wouldn't destroy the plants. And she's an amazing woman. Went to her farm one summer and heard her speak and met her, and I'd already read all of her books, and just quite an amazing person. So everybody's doing it in their own way, you know.
We're all old enough here that we lived through the 60s and early 70s, and
Right.
there is so many echoes. And you were talking about, what was her name?
Michelle Small-Wright.
So small, and communicating with plants. Immediately that brought to mind Carlos Castaneda, and, reading that, reading that several times.
Yes.
Those books.
Oh, the Bible of the 60s, right?
Right. And that there was this, opportunity back then for there to be a sort of broad cultural awakening, and it got kind of co-opted by various forces, and that now there is a sort of renaissance of that, which in part because there are, in the psychotherapeutic community, a real enthusiasm for the use of substances,
hallucinogens, right.
Psychedelics is
Right.
a better
Right. Right.
Or as
and
Houston Smith used it, entheogens,
Yes.
God-containing substances.
Yes.
But are we going to blow it again? It's sort of like...
Well, one of God's gifts to us is our curiosity, and it will lead us into some, awkward situations and learning experiences.
Yes.
And so, but for me, understanding that nature is alive and fully conscious, and that intelligence is interacting with us all the time if we will just pay attention. I can feel it now. Like, if I, on the rare occasion, smoke marijuana, I can feel what marijuana wants to do inside of me. And most of the time it's like, I don't want you running this show. I want to be running the show. So don't interfere with me. So that's why I use it very rarely. because you can feel its intention if you're paying attention.
Yes.
Right.
There are whole layers of reality that we're just so oblivious to. I mean, and that the channeling process and other experiences that you have. It's like there is a kind of perception or lack of perception of a barrier between our sort of normal everyday reality and the worlds that are beyond that, which that barrier is actually much more of an illusion and much more permeable.
Right.
And that,
Yes.
the sort of future of this planet, I think,
Relies on
relies
understanding
on understanding that.
I
and
agree.
opening to that.
I agree. Because if you realize how dynamic it's so ridiculous to refer to the natural world as if it was something separate from us. Okay, but we'll do it for purposes of making a point. If you understand that the natural world is absolutely vital and intelligent and interacting with us constantly, that it is intentional, that all those molecules agreed to become a tree, or agreed to become a corn, a corn cob, what the hell, an ear of corn, thank you. Okay, then you have reverence for everything in life, and you don't just stomp on it, or you don't just take more than you need.
Yeah, and Carlos Castaneda's character, the Don Juan,
right.
With talking about thanking all the plants when you ate them or prepared the food, and that not just a kind of rote memory of some grace, but that you learned
which is very much in many indigenous cultures.
Yes. Yeah.
The thanking of the animals, the thanking of the plants, thanking the great creator, thanking Mother Earth, keeping that as an active, conscious relationship.
Yes, yes.
Right.
There's a beautiful phrase in your shamanistic bio that I think we're talking about, and you're saying how you can use that. Transform obsolete beliefs into more positive and present-day perceptions. Can you say more about that?
Yes, that's what I feel I am facilitating, both in the private work, in the fire ceremonies, and in the acting classes, that we don't even know, let me say it this way, we aren't aware all the time of a belief system that formed either gradually or in the moment of stress, in a trauma. We're not always aware of how much that's affecting us, and it's obsolete. It's old news. It was based on a moment, at a stage of development. You're 7 years old. You experience this. You only have so much worldly knowledge to put it into context, but that gets frozen in time, in belief, and it also gets stored in the body. So if you can coax that into a new perception, the assemblage point, which Castaneda also talked about, which is moving your perception point to see it in a new light, then you can recognize it for what it is, acknowledge the trauma. Yes, I experienced that trauma, and it shouldn't have happened, but it did. But I am not that. I am not that experience. And I think that's one of the paradoxes of being human, is that we can so easily fall into identifying with the emotion of the moment. And if it's a good feeling, oh, I'm great. If it's a bad feeling, oh, I'm bad. And so we learned that the emotions move through us, They are in response to some stimuli, but they are not us, you know. And that's where teaching comes very much close together with shamanism, teaching acting, because you learn to understand what the emotions are. You know, they tell us where we are in the universe and in relationship. If somebody is offensive, I won't use any obvious examples, okay? You know, your body I don't want to be with this person. This person is not safe for me. That's good information, right? And, oh, this person is a light. I am drawn to him or her. I want to be in their presence, you know. Also anger. Anger is a big misunderstood emotion, I believe, in our culture, because that's where I grew up. That's what I know best. You know, I think this is a terrible generalization, but it's to make a point. We've experienced anger most of the time either as repressed or as rage, toxic rage. We don't understand what anger is as a divine human emotion that says, this is wrong. I don't accept this, you know? That helps us. It helps us survive, and it helps us learn to do the right thing, you know?
It provides a lot of energy.
A lot of energy. I feel like, you know, anger is our morality speaking out often. You know, when it gets suppressed and repressed and abused, then it does other things that become toxic. But as a basic part of our construction, it's as sacred as anything else.
There's obsolete beliefs that you were talking about that are from trauma, from illness.
Or just from being a kid who
Right.
figured things out wrong.
Right.
You know?
Didn't get the best instruction
Right.
or models.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's also the societal.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you were speaking to this
Yeah.
about levels of consciousness that they're obsolete.
Right, right. And we don't even we don't know it until we get into this realm of conversation. How often it was just passively distorted because we had a perception and either nobody around us reinforced that perception or quashed it and went, oh, yeah, that's just your imagination. Okay, so yeah, societal pressures mold those beliefs. And so often I will hear from people about just that passiveness of trying to fit in, wanting to belong. That's our big Achilles tendon, right? Psychically, we want to belong. So if what I say causes somebody to question my validity, then I quiet myself in order to belong. So the societal pressures are huge, and I've heard so many stories from my adult students about the teacher who made them wear a dunce cap because they colored something the wrong color in art class, or, you know, did this or did that. And I hear these stories about what teachers have done to children, and I think they all should be in jail, you know. A compassionate jail, but they should pay a price for being so wrong with children, you know. And it's amazing how many people just shut down because they don't get that needed response at that needed moment.
Or just, I can't do that.
Right,
Or that
right.
doesn't happen.
Right.
Well, everything we're talking about, general public would say,
Right.
oh, no.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right. I was at a gathering at the firehouse one night, and there was some sort of reception because we're all out in the lobby, and this woman caught my eye from across the room and started headed towards me, and I went, oh, great. I don't know her. I don't do I know her? I don't remember her. And she came right up to me and she goes, "You'll never remember me." And I said, "Oh, thank you." Right? And she said, "But you changed my life." And I went, "Ooh, how?" She goes, "Well, I was only in your class 2 or 3 times, but you gave me a piece where I had to cuss like a sailor. And it was so liberating to me that I've never been the same since in a good way." Yeah. And I remembered the scene. It is a great scene, and it's wildly inappropriate, but it's liberating. Talk about the things, oh, I can't do that. You know, people will look at a line in a piece and go, "I can't say this line." I go, "Well, you can. You just have to figure out how. You know, what's it going to take?" And then they get beyond that.
Cast against type.
Exactly.
Liberate what's
Exactly.
in there, suppressed.
Right. And, you know, I get people who get an angry scene and they finish the scene and I go, "How was that?" They thought, "That was great. Oh my God, that felt so good," to express that all the complexities that go with angry or with a fight. It's not just one emotion. We don't experience one emotion at a time, but they feel the liberation of being able to do that in a safe space where they're not hurting anybody and they're not going to be judged. In fact, they're going to be applauded. And that changes your relationship to those levels of expression. Yeah.
I was in a psychodrama training program.
Yes.
And Sheila was, my wife was present at the time. And I kept getting cast as the evil father.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking, oh my God.
Yeah, right.
They were helping me
Right.
liberate.
Right, yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so it's just, people are amazing. You know, I've learned, you know, they call me the teacher, but I swear to God, I know I'm responsible for the space and making it a safe space and keeping us focused, but I've learned so much from all the people I've worked with. It's amazing. I feel so fortunate. Yeah.
Well, to give back a little bit,
Right.
as you've been doing your whole life.
Right.
But for this conversation,
yes.
any suggestions you have for people in general, our listeners, to lift their spirits?
Yes. One is to, I think, always remember you're always at a point of choice. It's always your choice how you respond to any given circumstance. Okay? You possess that in your free will state. You're always at a point of choice. And also, to, in whatever way makes sense to a person, to remember that we're infinite, that we are not our history, just. We're not the limitations that we've accepted, okay? We are more powerful than we understand, and I don't mean that in terms of power over. I just mean source energy. We possess the same source energy as every other part of creation. We are not lacking, you know. And sometimes you have to remind yourself of that, you know. And sometimes you have to, you know, give yourself a little talking to and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? What is my soul telling me in this circumstance? And listen, because your spirit is gonna answer that question if you ask it and if you wait and listen for an answer. You know, because we're all intuitive, we're all compassionate, we're all perceptive and receptive. We have those capacities, and in times of stress, we have to figure out a way to signal that to ourselves, figure out a personal ritual, have a talisman. I often have people create talismans for themselves that they can either hang on their car mirror or put on their bathroom mirror or put on their altar. This symbolizes my wholeness, so that in times of stress, you can look at it and you go, yes, I am that. Okay, I am greater than the circumstance, because we're always greater than the circumstance. There's no circumstance that's greater than the human capacity, I think.
Yeah.
And we have to remind ourselves and not criticize ourselves that we forget. Oh, I forgot. You know, right? Right. We can always come back to empowerment. That's what I hope people can draw on.
Beautiful. Did you have anything?
No, I just wanted to thank you
Oh.
for coming in. This has been a very wonderful discussion.
I love it.
Oh, good.
I love having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
They move me, they stimulate me, and they convince me that we're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you for the possibility of...
Right. I have a website, Marc Clopton _shamanic I can't even say my own title. Shamanic Perspectives. I also have a Facebook page that's also Shamanic Perspectives. It doesn't have the hyphen in it. It's not a hyphen, it's an underline. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So they
they'll
can
be able to find you.
They can find me.
Yeah, and we'll have Maeve put it up.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for inviting me. This has been awesome. I love these conversations.
Me too, and that's why we do this.
I can get it. I can get it. Good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well done.
Yeah. So thank you, viewers and listeners, for being with us, and I hope you'll join us again next month.